For more on Tesla and big tech earnings, Dan Ives, Wedbush Securities Managing Director and Global Head of Technology Research. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Great to be here.
So,
great to see you.
I was just looking at some of the numbers for Tesla, and, I know that people don't buy Tesla because of the cars, and we've had this discussion before, cars still account for 3/4 of this company's revenue, Dan. So, yes, if you're looking at the robo-taxi future, I guess with Tesla, it's always a timeline question of when all of that stuff is going to actually start to be more meaningful.
Yeah, look, Julia, if you look, demand stabilizing, relative to what we've seen, especially over the last year. And China, I think that's an uptick. So that is important just in terms of the car business and even margins upticking. But the reality is, me and you've talked about many times, this is gonna be a golden chapter for Tesla in terms of autonomous and robotics, the AI roadmap. That's why you own the stock. That's why I think this thing ultimately is a double, over the next 12 to 18 months. As it plays out, robotaxi scales and autonomous, it's going to be the best, ultimately when it comes to consumer, best application out there.
Okay, Dan, break this down for me, explain this to me. How do they make money from autonomous? Because right now they own all the robotaxis, right? So they're making whatever small service revenue there is from those cars. But then ultimately, what does that profitability picture look like? And again, when can investors expect it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, and obviously when, right? That's the big question. Look, I think first, if you focus just on 1 year out, from NVIDIA to Microsoft to Apple, we go to every tech company out there, I think you've missed that transformational move, right? For Tesla, you gotta look out 2 or 3 years. And ultimately, look, can you get to 500,000, a million vehicles out there? That essentially, it's gonna be a cyber cab, it's gonna be a robo-taxi network.
Right, but do they own that network, or does someone else own that network? And what's the profitability of that network? Because a robotaxi, at least it's my understanding, is not a cheap thing to run, right?
Mm-hmm. Look, they're going to own that network. Right, it speaks to what I view as probably the biggest competitive threat to an Uber. If you look out over the years, what Tesla's going to do here. And remember, there's going to be their own network. And then if me or you, if we have a Tesla and we're at work, we could ultimately put that Tesla into the network. So while we're at work, it's actually giving rides out, right? And then ultimately, that speaks to the broader effect that's going to happen here is that this is laying out what's going to be this biggest chapter of growth ever. So you can look at over the next 1-2 years what earnings looks like. I could argue there could be growth power 12, 15, 20 hours earnings when you look out. And that's why I think this is a stock that should be green today, not red.
There's a lot that has to go right between now and then. The other thing that has to go right is the Optimus robots, which Musk talks about. But again, who's the customers for these robots? I've talked to robot people who say the real applications are not going to be in humanoid robots at all. They'll be in other functional robots.
Yeah, look, I think first on the factory side, that's clearly going to be an application when it comes to on the robotic side. But the biggest thing is going to be on the consumer. It's our view, and we're not talking 10 years now, we're talking 2, 3 years, that it's going to become commonplace to have robots in houses. And I think that's the important thing. That's what Tesla's going after.
Dan, for what? What are these robots in our houses going to be doing? In 2 to 3 years, you're telling me you're going to have an Optimus in your house. What is it going to do?
And again, that is my view. It will be doing the wash. It could be taking the dog out. In other words, it's going to be doing functions that in a house, these are going to become more and more commonplace over the next decade. And Tesla's going to own that robotics vision as well as the autonomous vision. That's why you're paying Musk $1 trillion in terms of, if he hits all the goals. That's why Musk is the most important asset for Tesla. It's the future. And what I view as a physical AI play, there's NVIDIA and then there's Tesla.
And just quickly, Dan, you're predicting that he'll get approval for that pay package?
Oh yeah, I think Look, I think that that's going to overwhelmingly be improved because look, it just comes down to like he is the only one that could lead Tesla into this chapter. And everyone understands as an investor, you need Musk, wartime CEO, locked in, set the high bar relative to the targets. Look at the last one. He hit all of them.
Dan, I want to switch gears and look ahead a little bit to next week when we're going to get a lot more earnings. Let's start with Apple here. As you know, there's a lot of chatter that there's pretty good uptake of the iPhone 17. That's not going to be in the quarter that they're about to report, but how is that going to feed through into maybe what we hear from Apple?
It's a surprise upgrade cycle. I mean, that's the reality, right? I mean, no one expected it was going to be, including, even myself, no one expected it was going to be this strong. So that's going to be clear, good in terms of obviously going to holiday season in terms of guidance. China, I mean, we talk about with Tesla, China now actually goes to a tailwind for Apple from a headwind. And that's, look, that's important because you go back to the last few months, New York City cab driver is bearish in Apple. Now you set up for what I believe is going to be the Apple Gemini partnership on AI. That's how you're going to get to what I think in a year from now is, $325, $350 stock.
And then, Dan, finally, we're also going to hear from Microsoft. And I'm curious, as we look at the sort of hyperscaler wars or cloud wars, if you will, do you think that Amazon's outage is going to allow Microsoft to grab a little market share?
I don't think so, because I think that continues to be sticky. But I do think, look, when it comes to Jassy and Amazon, they're playing catch up relative to enterprise, what Microsoft's doing, because they are in pole position on these enterprise AI workloads as that stays within that sort of Redmond base. Now, Google has clearly had massive growth, and I think you'll see it again in terms of all of our checks, what we'll see from GCP this quarter. Look, but for Amazon, that's the opportunity. And I think that's right now the big focus to make sure that they're not on the outside looking in.
Dan, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you.